Hello everybody, welcome back to another benchmark. It's Vert Low here, and today I'm going to be testing out Once Human with the GTX 1650. Now, I do have the GDDR6 edition of the graphics card, which is slightly faster. I have the latest Nvidia drivers installed, and I've just gone ahead and installed this game fresh on this system. So with that, let's begin benchmarking. So for this benchmark, we're going to be playing at 1080p. We're not going to be going any higher than that because of course it's a 1650. Now, the graphics preset that I am using is middle, so medium preset. Now, I'm just going to quickly go ahead and go over these settings and take a quick look for myself and show you guys what settings we're using here. Motion blur is turned off, of course. I have restarted the game to apply these settings. I'm not sure why it always says that you need to restart, but either way, let's jump into the game and see how playable it is at medium settings. Alright, and here I am. I just loaded up into the game where I left off last after I benchmarked the 3060 Ti. But as you can see here at medium, we are completely GPU bound at 1080p, which is what I was expecting. You can see that the CPU usage is quite high. It is a pretty old CPU though, but I am happy that it is utilizing a lot of the CPU. I actually played around earlier today with this system and it was using around 100% of the CPU, which is quite nice to see. A lot of games, at least modern games especially, are not utilizing CPUs that much. But then again, this CPU does only have 4 cores, so it is an older CPU, but either way, it's still capable of pushing this GPU completely to its max. As you can see, we are completely GPU bound, and even though our FPS isn't at that 100% 60 FPS all the time, or ever in this case, it's the frame time graph itself is not terrible. It is, the frame time is quite high, but in terms of stability, I'm not seeing any like massive drops or anything while I'm running around here. So it does look like, well, I say that and I just got a hiccup there, but it doesn't actually feel that terrible, even though we are in the 40 FPS range. I would probably want to lower the settings a little bit and get some better FPS in this, because I can feel sorry, I am still ill with what I'm presuming is flu, but I would prefer to play at lower settings and have, you know, a 60 FPS experience in this game as opposed to playing at medium now. You can see though that the 4 gigs of VRAM does appear to be enough for this game at the medium settings here at 1080p, which is quite nice to see. Let's go ahead and actually like harvest a resource and see if our FPS does fluctuate a little bit. Yeah, it does drop a little bit there because of the CPU, no doubt about it. But 40 to 50 FPS in this area, I don't think that's terrible. This game, for me at least, has not been the fastest paced game, so I think 40 FPS is playable. Medium probably looks a hell of a lot better than low, but for me personally, I'd rather play it you know, at a bit of a higher FPS to reduce that input delay, because I can feel it. But if you're somebody who's used to playing at 60 FPS or maybe even lower than that because of, you know, budget systems, then you might not notice it as much. But I definitely do these days. I'm a little bit more spoiled these days for sure. But let's try out some lower settings, because I'm going to say, you know, medium 1080p is completely fine for a very casual player. And the game actually looks pretty good, at least in my opinion, at medium, even at 1080p. So yeah, let's go ahead and try out some more settings. Alright, so I've restarted the game just to make sure that the settings apply correctly, because this game is one of the games that recommends to restart when you change settings. So we're still at 1080p, we're using the low preset, which doesn't actually apply the lowest settings in the game because this game has another preset below this, so very low, but we're going to try out the low settings. These are the settings that it applies. Let's go ahead and jump on back in and see how it runs. Maybe we'll hit 60 all the time here. Alright, and here we are. I'm just going to reset my 1% lows. I've just loaded into the game. And low settings does look quite a bit worse. But do bear in mind that I am playing on a larger than 1080p monitor. So, you know, games, if I play anything at 1080p, it always looks a little bit worse, because it's kind of like playing 720p or 1600 by 900 on a you know, 1080p monitor. It always looks a little bit worse just because the resolution isn't perfect for the monitor. And no difference here. You know, it does look a little bit worse just because it is 1080p for me. I don't play at 1080p anymore. But In terms of FPS, we've actually had quite a significant jump up there from the medium settings. So, you know, being in that 70 FPS range here is pretty good. Now, we have lost a lot of the grass on the ground, a lot of the bushes and stuff. That you can see that they pop in much closer, but you know, I'm not complaining about this because at the end of the day, sorry, this GPU was very budget end when it released, and still being able to play games, you know, in 2024, I think is completely fine, even if you have to do it at really low settings. You pretty much always have to play at really low settings with a lot of games for, well, with the 1650, but you can see that my VRAM utilization has definitely dropped down, so got absolutely no limits there with the VRAM for sure. And we are always above 60 FPS, it would seem. Actually closer to the 70 FPS range, if not 80 FPS sometimes in this area. Now, do let me know in the comments if there's more intensive areas than this in the game. This is not a game in which I actually personally like, so I haven't been playing it, as you can probably tell, since I'm in pretty much the starting area after the tutorial. But I do think it has a pretty good variety of, you know, trees and just fauna and so on in general to give us a good mix of different graphical intensities, like the water reflections and stuff. You know, there's different areas in this place that I can run around in a little bit, give you a little bit of an example here. But we are still completely GPU bound. You can see my CPU usage is pretty high up there, like it's at 90-95% a lot of the time, but still not having any stuttering issues here. And the game, while it doesn't look particularly that good at the low settings, we are over 60 FPS. I mean, I can't complain about it. We're getting over 60 FPS in a 2024 release, you know, and it's using a very budget end PC. This is not running on a very good PC at all. And it's actually pretty crazy how stable it is. You know, a lot of the newer games coming out, especially if you're running them on budget low-end PCs, they've been staggering all over the place, stuttering all over, you know, FPS drops everywhere, but this one's actually really stable. Let's go ahead and mine and see if we do get some FPS drops. Usually in survival type games or games like this, as soon as you start doing any kind of like interaction, that's when you get stutters. I know that was the case for like 7 Days to Die, Ark Survival Evolved, those kinds of games, but no, we didn't get a stutter this time. It's pretty stable. Frame time graph is fairly stable, even though the frame times themselves are pretty high, but it's still completely fine. Now, the input delay issue that I was having earlier, not as much of an issue anymore, because we are at pretty decent FPS. We did just drop below 60, but I'm going to give it the absolutely completely playable pass here, and I just can't believe, like, for this kind of like CPU, it's over 10 years old at this point. I can't imagine your guys' CPUs really struggling too much with this game because, yeah, 10-year-old CPU is doing fine. So let's try out the very low settings and see if we're going to be CPU bound, because you can see it like 60 to 70, sometimes 80 FPS nearly. We are almost completely using all of the CPU. So I'm going to go ahead and restart the game, try out very low settings, see if we can get it CPU bound. But yeah, let's give it a go. Alright, here we are. I've just restarted the game once again, of course, to apply settings. So we're still playing at 1080p, of course, and we're now using the very low settings, or very low preset. Now, this does apply everything onto the lowest, so the game is going to look as bad as it can look, essentially, with these settings, but we're going to get the most performance out of it. So let's jump back in, see how it runs. Alright, here we are. My game just restarted, and I actually don't know which settings changed between low and very low preset, because I was not paying too much attention to it. A little stutter there, but I have just loaded the game up now. I can definitely tell the water looks really bad now at the lowest settings in the game. We are at a pretty solid 70 FPS, so very similar FPS to the low preset, but that should be the case because it honestly didn't change. There wasn't many difference. There wasn't a big difference between the low preset and the very low preset. And if you're wondering why I'm struggling a little bit with my words and stuff, I am still ill, so I've still got a bit of brain fog, you could say. So I've just run over to another area just to test out what mining is like. You can see that the lighting is a bit messed up here at the very low settings, but that's to be expected, I guess. We are playing at the absolute minimum settings that we can play at with the game right now, and I'm getting around 90 FPS, which is definitely overkill. You know, most people I would have to imagine who are playing with a 1650 are playing at 60 hertz or with 60 hertz monitors. So probably just increase your graphical settings, you know. Find a mix between low and medium, I would say, because medium looks pretty good, but the FPS isn't ideal, and low kind of gives you a little bit more FPS than you need. You know, you sit around 70 FPS with the low preset, sometimes mid 65s, and even sometimes reaching up to 80 FPS with the medium, or sorry, with the low preset. So I'd probably personally try and find a mix between low and medium and just kind of stick to that and play at around 55 to 65 FPS on average. I think that's kind of like the sweet spot here. But we are still completely GPU bound at that 90 FPS range, which is pretty crazy. VRAM usage has also decreased again, but yeah, this is definitely overkill. For a GPU like this, you can definitely play with some, you know, either play with an FPS cap set to 60 or 75 if you play at that refresh rate, I would say, or just increase your graphics settings a little bit. But this final part of the benchmark, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lower my resolution, and we're going to see what the CPU bottleneck is here with this system. Not really too important, but I just kind of want to do it out of curiosity, considering we were getting 90 FPS and we were still GPU bound. So let's go ahead and lower the resolution and see what kind of FPS we can get out of this CPU. Alright, so now we're going to be playing at 720p using the very low preset. I actually tried out 1600 by 900, but I was still GPU bound at them settings, or those settings. So yeah, we're going to try out 720p instead, very low preset. See what the CPU can push here in terms of frame rate. Oh my god. Did anybody else see that? We're at 720p. Oh my... Alright, so 720p is actually still going to be GPU bound. Okay. Alright. Well, we've got one more thing we can try here built into the game, and that is to go ahead and lower the render scale. Alright, so since we were still GPU bound at the 720p range, what I've gone ahead and done now is we're playing at 720p, still using the very low preset, but I've changed the render scale down to 60%, so we're not technically at 720p anymore. I actually don't know what I don't know what resolution this is anymore, but it's much lower than 720p, that's for sure. But yeah, I just want to see what the CPU is able to push here in terms of frame rate. So question mark resolution, technically 720p, 60% render scale at very low settings. Let's try it out, see what the CPU can push. Now, it's important to remember at this stage of the benchmark, we're not here to look at the graphics, we're not here to look at the visuals, we're just here to see what kind of FPS the CPU can push. And I actually cannot believe that a decade-old CPU, you can see that we are completely CPU bound now, but a decade-old CPU is getting 140 to 160 FPS. Yeah, dropping down to 120 there. This feels really smooth though now. Obviously, I would expect it to feel smooth. We're at 100 frames, even if, you know, technically the graphics look awful. But you guys should not be having any kind of CPU issues. If you got a CPU within the last 5 years at least, doesn't really matter how budget end it is. Well, yeah, I guess I should be careful my words there. Maybe it does matter a little bit, but you would need a seriously potato PC or a serious potato CPU, you know, from the last couple of years to be able to not be able to play this game at 60 FPS. I'm really struggling to imagine anybody with a CPU that's not capable of playing this game, considering this is a 10-year-old CPU and I'm getting 120 to 160 frames. It's varying quite a bit, but maybe if there was a lot of combat going on or something, it would drop a little bit. Not 100% sure, but you definitely should not be limited by your CPU. And if you are, maybe it's time to get a new CPU. But that's going to do for today's benchmarking on this game with the 1650/i7-4790K, just out of curiosity. But I hope you found some use out of this. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. Got any questions? Let me know in the comments. And yeah, if you're looking to get this game and you're looking at a 1650 or something, you know, just do know it can play it. It just might not be the most beautiful game you've ever played in your life with a 1650, but it is playable. So yeah, I've been Verda. Thanks for checking out the video. Until next time, guys, take care of yourselves, and goodbye for now.